Number 1. Homo Luzonensis, Callao Cave. Picture the mouth of a limestone cave in the Peña Blanca hills of northern Luzon, where the light falls in hard shafts and the floor is cool and damp. In the year 2019, a team led by Florent Detroit of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle in Paris and Armand Salvador Mahiris of the University of the Philippines announced something that reordered the human family tree. They had found a new species of human. They called it Homo Luzonensis, after the island itself. The evidence was small and strange, just 13 pieces of bone and tooth, drawn from at least 3 individuals, 2 adults, and 1 juvenile. 7 teeth, a few finger and toe bones, nothing more. That scarcity is exactly what makes it unsettling. The molars are tiny, almost as small as your own. Yet the premolars carry 2 and 3 roots in a pattern no modern human shows. Stranger still are the finger and toe bones, which curve like those of an Australopith, a creature that climbed trees millions of years ago. Modern teeth on an ancient hand. The mosaic refuses to sit anywhere neatly. The dating carries its own weight. A single foot bone recovered back in 2007 was measured at about 67,000 years old. Later, digs in 2011 and 2015 produced the rest, in the same window of 50,000 to 67,000 years. But the deeper record on Luzon runs far older. At the nearby Kalinga site, researchers found a rhinoceros skeleton, cut apart by stone tools dated to roughly 709,000 years ago. Someone was butchering animals on this island long before Homo Luzonensis left its bones in the cave. And here's the sinister part. Luzon has never been joined to the mainland by a land bridge. To reach it, ancestors had to cross open ocean, whether they meant to or not. Detroit suggested the species may descend from an early Homo erectus that shrank on the island and reverted to primitive traits, an echo of the famous hobbit, Homo floresiensis, on the island of Flores. Critics are cautious. A species named from teeth and finger bones with no skull sits on fragile ground until more is found. What we can say is that the Pleistocene islands of Southeast Asia were crowded with different kinds of human at once. Sapiens, Floresiensis, Luzonensis, the Denisovans, whose blood still runs thickest in the Aita Magbukan people of the Philippines today. Several human species sharing an archipelago, each shaped by its own scrap of land. No one knows what became of the Luzon people, whether they were absorbed, outcompeted, or simply vanished as our own kind arrived. To understand how such a fragile lineage could exist at all, you have to understand what islands do to the creatures marooned on them, and the next island held something built not of bone, but of stone. Number 2. Nan Madol Pohnpei. Off the southeast shore of Pohnpei, in the open western Pacific, a dead city stands in the water. Nan Madol is a complex of more than 90 artificial islets, raised inside a lagoon and threaded together by tidal canals. People have called it the Venice of the Pacific, but that name is too gentle. The islets were built from columnar basalt. Natural 6-sided logs of stone formed as lava cooled, stacked one across another like the walls of a log cabin. Some individual stones weigh as much as 50 tons. The whole complex is estimated to hold around 750,000 metric tons of basalt, moved with no wheels, no metal tools, and no draft animals. This was the seat of the Sodelur dynasty, the line of rulers who unified Pohnpei and governed from roughly 1100 to 1628 of the Common Era, though the islet building may have begun centuries earlier. At the heart of it stands Nandawas, the royal mortuary, its walls rising as high as 7.5 meters, its cornerstones weighing up to 50 tons each. It is a tomb complex, and it feels like one. The legends around it are dark. Pohnpeian tradition holds that 2 brother sorcerers, Olusepa and Olosohpa, flew the enormous stones into place through magic, and a taboo has long clung to the ruins. Outsiders who sleep overnight among the walls, the stories say, may sicken or die, and guides have historically refused to stay after dark. The Sodelur themselves are remembered as growing cruel and tyrannical until a culture hero named Isoklekel, said to be born of a woman and the thunder god, led an invasion and cast them down. After that, the centralized dynasty gave way to a chiefly system, and the city in the water was slowly abandoned. The engineering remains a genuine puzzle. The basalt was quarried elsewhere on Pohnpei, and how multi-ton columns were carried across the island and floated out to the reef is still argued over. Rafts, sledges, and levers are all proposed, and none fully satisfies. The islets could not grow food or hold fresh water, so both had to be imported to sustain the elite who lived there. Radiocarbon work by archaeologists such as J. Stephen Athens places the Great Megalithic Phase after about 1180. In 2016, Nan Madol was named a World Heritage Site, and in the same breath placed on the list of sites in danger, its walls choked by mangroves and its canals filling with silt. Divers have even reported submerged walls and features in the surrounding lagoon, feeding stories of a larger drowned city, though claims of a vast sunken complex remain unverified. The sinister reputation is a braid of three threads: the tyranny remembered in legend, the taboo on the dead, and the persistent tales of misfortune falling on those who disturb the tombs. But if the living treated their rulers strangely here, another island treated its dead in a way that, at first sight, seems to make no anatomical sense at all. Number 3. The Teouma Lapita Cemetery, Vanuatu. In 2004, quarrying on the island of Fate in Vanuatu cut into the oldest and largest cemetery of the Lapita people ever found. The teams, led by Stuart Bedford and Matthew Spriggs of the Australian National University with Ralph Regan Vanu, uncovered graves about 3,000 years old. These were the first human beings to reach remote Oceania, the last great unpeopled frontier on Earth, and they announced themselves through their distinctive pottery, stamped with fine tooth-like patterns. What the excavators found in the graves is genuinely eerie. Many of the dead had been buried whole, and then, after the flesh had rotted away, someone had returned and removed their skulls. In one grave known as Burial 10, a headless man lies with 3 separate skulls arranged in a row across his chest. The removed skulls were curated, carried, and sometimes reburied elsewhere on the site. The bodies themselves were placed in strange positions, extended, flexed, disarticulated, which is why at first glance the anatomy seems impossible. It is not a massacre. It is a belief system, one that treated the skull as the seat of a person, the part worth keeping. The grave goods deepened the picture. Intact, elaborately decorated pots were placed with the dead, including a rare vessel bearing a design of 4 birds and another shaped with a human face. And when scientists turned to the bones themselves, the results overturned old assumptions. Strontium isotopes locked into tooth enamel in childhood showed that several of these people were not born on Fate. They were first-generation migrants arriving from somewhere across the water. Then came the ancient DNA. When researchers sequenced the Teouma individuals, they expected a thoroughly mixed ancestry, part Asian, part Papuan, the blend seen in Pacific Islanders today. Instead, they found something close to pure East Asian or Austronesian ancestry, with almost no Papuan component at all. That meant the Papuan ancestry in modern Pacific peoples arrived later, in migration waves that followed the first colonists. The founders had swept across thousands of kilometers of ocean almost as a single population. The colonists lived on turtle, fish, and shellfish, and on animals they carried with them. And around the time they arrived, the island's giant horned tortoise, Myolania, and its flightless birds disappear from the record, implicating human impact almost immediately. The radiocarbon dates tightened the cemetery's use to just a few generations, a narrow, vivid window into the moment humanity crossed its last ocean. Teouma has become the anchor point for the whole Lapita expansion toward Fiji and, eventually, Polynesia. It is a portrait of pioneers who honored their dead by taking their heads, and the pattern of animals vanishing at the moment of arrival was about to repeat itself on a far larger and stranger island. Number 4. Madagascar's butchered elephant birds. Madagascar broke away from the Indian landmass about 88 million years ago, and everything on it evolved in near total isolation. Among its lost giants were the elephant birds, flightless retites of monstrous size. The largest Varambe titan may have stood 3 meters tall and weighed between 500 and 730 kilograms, making it the heaviest bird known to science. Its eggs were the largest of any animal that has ever lived, up to 34 centimeters long and holding 8 to 10 liters, the equivalent of about 150 chicken eggs. In 2018, James Hansford and Samuel Turver of the Zoological Society of London published a discovery that quietly rewrote the island's timeline. On elephant bird bones from Christmas River in the Taulambaibi region of southern Madagascar, they found cut marks and fractures made by stone tools. The bones were radiocarbon dated to about 10,500 years ago. The problem was that humans were not thought to have reached Madagascar until roughly 4,000 years ago. This pushed the human presence back some 6,000 years. The cut marks sit on the leg bones, in positions that match deliberate butchery rather than the gnawing of carnivores or the wear of trampling. And the implication is difficult. If people were on Madagascar that early, then humans and these giant birds coexisted for thousands of years before the Great Extinction Wave, which undercuts the simple idea of a rapid slaughter on arrival. The truth appears slower and sadder. Elephant birds likely survived until about 1,000 years ago, dying out gradually as people cleared forest for cattle and rice, collected their enormous eggs, and hunted them. Genetic work in the same year split the elephant birds into 3 genera and revealed a startling relative. Their closest living kin is not any large African bird, but the kiwi of New Zealand, small, nocturnal, and marooned on another remote island. Flighted ancestors had dispersed across oceans, and gigantism did the rest. Reduced optic lobes in elephant bird skulls even hint that, like the kiwi, they may have been active at night. These birds echoed through human imagination. A 17th century French governor, Etienne de Flacourt, recorded local accounts of a giant bird the people called the Vuron Patra. The Arabic and European legend of the roc, the bird large enough to carry off an elephant, reported by Marco Polo, may trace back to Madagascar's giants and their eggs. Today, eggshell fragments still litter parts of the southern coast, and rare intact eggs sell at auction for tens of thousands of dollars. The subfossil sites of the south, such as Taulambaibi and Ambolisatra, preserve not only the birds but giant lemurs and horned crocodiles that died in the same late collapse. The Christmas River cut marks remain debated, with some researchers wanting more sites before accepting so early a date, but the deeper lesson is clear. Animals that evolved without predators are helpless when hunters finally come. On another island, that helplessness left a bone bed that reads like a crime scene. Number 5. Wrangel Island's last mammoths. Far north of the Siberian coast in the Arctic Ocean above Chukotka lies Wrangel Island. It is a bleak, wind-scoured place, and it was the last refuge of the woolly mammoth. On the mainland, mammoths had vanished thousands of years earlier, but on Wrangel, a population held on until roughly 4,000 years ago. To feel the weight of that number, consider this. When the last mammoths were still breathing on Wrangel Island, the Great Pyramids of Giza already stood finished in the Egyptian desert, and the civilizations of Mesopotamia were writing on clay. The island trapped them. As the Ice Age ended and seas rose, around 10,000 to 9,000 years ago, the land bridge to the mainland drowned, and a group of mammoths was left isolated. That founding population was tiny, and for years scientists told a grim story about what followed. In 2017, Rebecca Rogers and Montgomery Slatkin described what they called a genomic meltdown. The small, inbred population had accumulated harmful mutations. They predicted lost genes for smell, skeletal defects, and even a strange translucent satiny coat as the animal's genetics unraveled. But the story took a turn. In 2024, a team led by Love Delaine analyzed 21 mammoth genomes and found something more surprising. The population had crashed to perhaps as few as 8 founding individuals, then rebounded to several hundred, and stayed stable for around 6,000 years. The mammoths were not slowly rotting from within. Their diversity was low, yes, but they endured. And that reframes their end. Rather than a long genetic decline, the final extinction now looks sudden. Perhaps a single catastrophe, a disease, a freak icing event, or one brutal season that finished a population already balanced on a knife edge. The radiocarbon dates cluster tightly at the end, with the youngest remains around 3,700 to 4,000 years old. The island held stable steppe tundra vegetation that buffered them for millennia. These Wrangel mammoths were somewhat smaller than their mainland ancestors, though not true dwarfs. And crucially, there is no firm evidence that humans killed them. The earliest known human site on the island barely overlaps with the mammoths, if at all. They may have simply run out of luck. Some of the deleterious mutations found in their genomes were even resurrected in the laboratory, rebuilt as proteins to test how badly they functioned. Wrangel Island is now a strict nature reserve and a World Heritage Site, its frozen ground still yielding tusks and bones that feed the dream of one day bringing the mammoth back. It stands as a warning written in ice. A species can survive isolation for thousands of years and still be erased in an instant. On the next island, though, there was nothing ambiguous about the cause of death. There, the hunters left their signature all over the bones. Number 6. Aetokremnos and the dwarf hippo slaughter, Cyprus. At the southern tip of Cyprus, on the Crete Peninsula, a collapsed rock shelter sits on the edge of a cliff. Its name, Crete Aetokremnos, means eagle cliff. Beginning in the late 1980s, the archaeologist Alan Simmons of the University of Nevada excavated it, and what he found was extraordinary. Packed into the deposit were the remains of more than 500 pygmy hippopotamuses. The dating placed the site at roughly 12,000 years ago, making it some of the earliest firm evidence of human beings anywhere on Cyprus. The animal was Phaneurios minutus, a dwarf hippo about the size of a large pig, weighing perhaps 200 kilograms. It had shrunk to that size through insular dwarfism, the process by which large animals stranded on islands evolved smaller and smaller over generations. Alongside the hippos lay dwarf elephants, birds, stone tools, marine shells, and the traces of hearths. To Simmons, the message was clear. The first people to reach Cyprus had hunted these animals and may have driven them to extinction within a matter of centuries. Not everyone agrees, and the debate is a genuine one. Some of the bones show burning and breakage patterns consistent with human processing. But critics ask whether the people truly killed all 500 hippos, or whether they simply camped on top of a natural death assemblage, a place where the animals had already died and the humans arrived after. It is one of the central problems of island archaeology, the difficulty of telling overkill apart from natural mass death or climate stress. What is not in doubt is the timing. The endemic dwarf fauna of Cyprus disappears right as humans arrive. Cyprus is a true oceanic island. It was never connected to the mainland, which means every animal on it and every person arrived across open sea. The dwarf hippos had evolved with no predators at all, and so they had no fear. That fearlessness made them easy prey the moment humans stepped ashore. The radiocarbon dates from Aetokremnos are among the most scrutinized in all of Mediterranean prehistory, precisely because they pin down this collision between people and a vanishing world. The site predates the island's first farming villages, such as Kirokitia, by well over 1,000 years, revealing a pioneer phase no one expected. Later discoveries, such as Eya Varvara Asprokremnosi, confirmed that people were on Cyprus in this same early pre-farming window. There is even a thread of folklore in the science. The dwarf hippo takes its genus name Phaneurios, from a Cypriot saint invoked to find lost things, tying a modern legend to a Pleistocene ghost. The dwarf elephant that shared the island, Palaeoloxodon cypriotes, stood barely a meter tall. Together they form one of the densest accumulations of an extinct island species ever linked to early humans. But if the first cypriotes seem impossibly early, another island in the same sea holds tools that suggest seafarers far older still, from a time before our own species even existed. Number 7. The Plakias tools of Crete. In 2008 and 2009, a survey led by Thomas Strasser of Providence College and Eleni Panagopoulou reported stone tools near the village of Plakias on the rugged south coast of Crete. The tools were of a kind that should not have been there. They included quartz hand axes, cleavers, and scrapers of a Kulian and Middle Paleolithic type, technologies associated not with modern humans, but with far older members of the genus Homo. The artifacts were eroding out of ancient soils tied to raised marine terraces, geological benches lifted above the sea over immense spans of time. By correlating those terraces with the history of sea level, the researchers estimated a minimum age of about 130,000 years and possibly 190,000 years or more. The implication was seismic. Crete has been an island for roughly 5 million years, cut off from the mainland by deep water throughout the entire Ice Age. Nothing walked there. Anything that reached Crete reached it by sea. And if hominins were making tools on Crete 130,000 years ago, then some pre-modern human, perhaps a form of Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or a Neanderthal, had crossed open Mediterranean water long before anyone thought our ancestors could sail. That would push the story of hominin seafaring back by well over 100,000 years. Even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, reaching Crete meant crossing at least 40 kilometers of open water, most likely in stages, island by island. It demands planning, watercraft, and a kind of foresight the textbooks reserved for much later humans. And Crete is not alone. Similar claims have emerged from Naxos and other Aegean islands, including the site of Stellida, where later excavations recovered tools interpreted as Middle Paleolithic and perhaps older. The skeptics have real ground to stand on. The dating is indirect, it rests on the age of the landforms, not on the tools themselves. And erosion surfaces are notoriously slippery to date. No hominin fossils accompany the Plakias tools, so the identity of the toolmakers is inferred entirely from the shape of the stone. And the Achillean hand axe form was in use for over 1 million years, which makes precise attribution difficult. The find remains a live and unresolved controversy, cited by some as a paradigm shift and by others as a caution against reading too much into eroded ground. Yet the surrounding evidence makes the idea less absurd. Crete had its own dwarf elephants and dwarf hippos, animals that must have crossed water to get there, whether by swimming or rafting. If elephants could cross, why not a determined hominin on a raft of logs? The tools were made from local quartz, the durable stone at hand near the coast. Whoever shaped them, they belong to a growing reassessment of when our lineage first braved the sea. And braving the sea is exactly what carried our own species to an island where they left behind the oldest pictures on Earth. Number 8. Leang Tedongnge, Cave Art, Sulawesi. In December of 2019, in a hidden limestone valley on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, researchers documented a painting on the wall of a cave called Leang Tedongnge. It shows a Sulawesi warty pig rendered in dark red ochre, 136 centimeters wide, complete with the warts on its face, the bristles along its back, and a crest of hair. When the team dated a thin crust of calcite that had grown over the paint, using the decay of uranium within it, they arrived at a minimum age of about 45,500 years. Reported in 2021 by Adam Broom, Maxime Aubert, and their colleagues at Griffith University, it is the oldest known figurative artwork anywhere on Earth, the oldest recognizable picture of a real thing. Beside the pig are 2 hand stencils made by pressing a hand to the wall and blowing pigment across it, leaving a ghostly negative. And this is not an isolated masterpiece. At a nearby cave, Ling Bulu Sipong 4, the same researchers dated a hunting scene to about 43,900 years, which may be the oldest story ever told in pictures. Among its figures are therianthropes, part human and part animal beings, hinting at a spiritual imagination already at work more than 40,000 years ago. For most of the 20th century, the story of art began in the painted caves of Ice Age Europe at places like Chauvet. The Sulawesi dates shattered that view. They rival or exceed the oldest European art, and they place the birth of representation not in Europe at all, but on a remote island in Southeast Asia. Sulawesi lies east of the Wallace Line, the deep water boundary that many land animals never crossed, which means the artists were among the seafaring modern humans island hopping their way toward Australia. They carried a rich symbolic culture across the water with them. There is a tragedy folded into the wonder. The paintings are physically falling apart. Flakes of the ancient surface are peeling away, driven by salt crystallizing in the rock and by a changing climate, and worsened by quarrying nearby. Panels documented decades ago have visibly degraded. In a cruel irony, the world's oldest art is being lost at the very moment we finally understand how old it is. The Mars Pohnpei karst that holds these caves contains hundreds of decorated shelters, one of the richest early rock art landscapes on the planet. Earlier, a hand stencil at Leang Timpusang had already been dated to at least 39,900 years. The warty pig depicted was a key prey animal, endemic to the island, suggesting a tie between art, survival, and perhaps ritual. Indonesian researchers such as Basrain Burhan worked alongside the Australian dating specialists to bring these images into the light. They proved that the human mind, carried onto a far island, was already fully capable of imagination. And islands did not only shape minds, they reshaped bodies, growing giants small, as another island off California reveals. Number 9. The Channel Islands Pygmy mammoths and Arlington Springs man. Off the coast of Southern California lie the Northern Channel Islands, and in the Ice Age they held one of evolution's neatest tricks. There lived the pygmy mammoth, Mammoths exilis, a dwarf that stood only about 1 7/10 meters at the shoulder and weighed roughly a tenth of its ancestor. That ancestor was the Columbian mammoth, a giant of the mainland. During the Ice Age, when sea levels were low, the 4 northern islands were fused into a single landmass that scientists call Santa Rosae, and the mammoths reached it by swimming several kilometers across open water. Columbian mammoths were powerful swimmers with an acute sense of smell, able to detect vegetation and fresh water across a sea gap, which explains how they made the crossing. Once marooned, they shrank. Over tens of thousands of years of island isolation, with limited food and no large predators, the giants dwindled into ponies. In 1994, the National Park Service and the paleontologist Larry Agenbrod excavated a remarkably complete pygmy mammoth skeleton on Santa Rosa Island, a near-perfect record of the process. But the islands hold a second human secret. In 1959 and 1960, Phil Orr of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History discovered human remains on Santa Rosa, a find known as Arlington Springs man. When the bones were redated with modern methods, they came out at about 13,000 years old, among the oldest human remains anywhere in North America. And here is the crucial point. Santa Rosa was an island even at the height of the Ice Age. It was never connected to the mainland. So the people who left those bones must have used boats to get there. That single fact feeds one of the most important ideas in American archaeology, the coastal migration hypothesis, sometimes called the Kelp Highway. Rather than walking down an inland corridor between melting ice sheets, the first Americans may have moved south along the Pacific coast in watercraft, living off the rich kelp forest ecosystems. Arlington Springs man is a witness for that seaborne route. The timing raises a hard question. Arlington Springs man, at around 13,000 years, overlaps with the last of the pygmy mammoths, which vanished in roughly the same window. Did people help finish them off? The cause of the extinction is genuinely debated among climate change, shifting vegetation, the drowning of Santa Rosae as seas rose and split it into separate islands, and human hunting. Some remains carry possible traces of charcoal and burning, but nothing settles it. The islands also held an endemic fox and earlier a giant deer mouse, a whole small world of island specialists. The Chumash people, the region's indigenous inhabitants, hold deep ancestral ties to these islands. A dwarf elephant and one of the oldest Americans, sharing the same few square kilometers. And across the Pacific, on the last island of our journey, evolution ran the trick in reverse and built a monster. Number 10. Haast's eagle, New Zealand. New Zealand was a world without land mammals, save for a few bats. Into that vacancy, birds evolved to fill nearly every role, and one of them became a nightmare. Haast's eagle, Hieridus murray, was the largest eagle that has ever existed. The females weighed between 10 and 15 kilograms, with a wingspan reaching 2.5 to 3 meters. They preyed on moa, the giant flightless birds of New Zealand, some of which weighed up to 200 kilograms. That means this eagle routinely attacked prey up to 15 times its own weight. Its weapons were terrible. The talons were comparable in size to the claws of a tiger, and its grip is estimated to have been powerful enough to crush a moa's pelvis and shatter bone. It likely hunted from a perch, dropping onto its victim at high speed, seizing the pelvis to immobilize it, and then killing with a strike to the head or neck. Its wings were short and broad, built not for soaring over open plains but for maneuvering through forest. The eagle was named after Julius von Haast, the 19th century geologist who described early remains recovered from swamps and caves. But its true nature came clear only in 2005 when Michael Bunce, Trevor Worthy, and their colleagues sequenced its DNA. The result was astonishing. The closest living relatives of this enormous raptor are among the smallest eagles in the world, the little eagles of the genus Hieridus. Haast's eagle had increased its body size perhaps 10 to 15-fold after reaching New Zealand, and it had done so with startling speed within roughly 700,000 to 1.8 million years. It is one of the most extreme cases of island gigantism ever documented, a small eagle swelling to fill the empty throne of apex predator, and it lived alongside people. Mara oral tradition tells of a giant bird called puakai or hokioi, powerful enough to attack and carry off human beings. Some rock art in South Island shelters may depict it. For a long time, these were dismissed as pure myth until the fossils and the legends were laid side by side and the overlap became undeniable. Humans and this eagle shared the land. That sharing did not last. Polynesian settlers, the ancestors of the Maori, arrived around 1300 of the Common Era, and within a century or two they had hunted the moa to extinction. The eagle depended entirely on those giant birds. When the moa were gone, the specialized predator could not survive, and Haast's eagle followed them into oblivion around 1400. Its total population had probably only ever numbered in the low thousands, constrained by its enormous prey. Some scientists once debated whether the bird was mainly a scavenger, but the shape of its talons points firmly to active predation. It is a clean and brutal case of trophic collapse. Remove the foundation, and the giant at the top falls with it. New Zealand, a world of birds, was dismantled in the space of a few generations, and when you set all 10 of these islands beside one another, a single pattern begins to surface. There is a principle at work behind almost every discovery in this list, and biologists call it the island rule. On islands, large animals tend to shrink and small animals tend to grow. The reasons run in opposite directions. A big animal marooned on a small patch of land with limited food and, crucially, no large predators is under pressure to get smaller because a smaller body needs less to survive. A small animal released from the competition and predators of the mainland is free to grow into niches that would otherwise be closed to it. You have already met both halves of the rule. The dwarf hippos and dwarf elephants of Cyprus and Crete shrunk to the size of pigs and ponies. The pygmy mammoths of the Channel Islands, a tenth the weight of their ancestors. Even Homo floresiensis, and quite possibly Homo luzonensis, may be humans that dwarfed on their islands. On the other side stand the giants, the elephant birds of Madagascar, the heaviest birds that ever lived. Haast's eagle, a small raptor swollen into a monster, and their gentle cousin, the kiwi, a survivor of the very same island evolution that produced the giants. What unites them is fragility. The same isolation that sculpts these strange forms also strips them of fear. Animal after animal on these islands evolved with no large predators and so no instinct to flee. That predator naivety is the fatal flaw. And these transformations happen fast in thousands of years rather than millions, driven by the founder effect, by genetic drift, and by the relaxing of the pressures that shape the mainland. Islands are natural laboratories sealed off, running their own experiments in what life can become. But the experiments are delicate. The very uniqueness that islands create is also what dooms it, the moment something new steps ashore. And nothing new stepped ashore without first crossing the sea. Every single discovery in this list depended on something crossing open water. Nothing here could be reached on foot. The animals came first, often by means that still amaze. Columbian mammoths swam kilometers to reach the California islands. The ancestors of the elephant birds and of their kiwi relatives dispersed across whole oceans while they could still fly. Dwarf elephants and hippos somehow reached Cyprus and Crete, swimming or rafting on storm debris across deep Mediterranean water. Then came the people, and their crossings are the deeper mystery. The Lapita voyagers of Teouma sailed across the open Pacific with intent, carrying pottery, animals, and their dead's traditions with them. The artists of Sulawesi were part of the great modern human migration that island hopped past the Wallace Line and onward to Australia. Arlington Springs man reached his island by boat 13,000 years ago, a witness to the coastal kelp highway route into the Americas. And most provocative of all, the tools of Plakias hint that a pre-modern hominin crossed to Crete more than 100,000 years before our own species is supposed to have mastered the sea. True oceanic islands like Luzon and Cyprus force the question most sharply, because they were never joined to anything. To be there at all is proof of a crossing. Sea level itself was a restless gatekeeper, opening land bridges in the cold and drowning them in the warmth, fusing the Channel Islands into Santa Rosa, and then splitting them apart again. Isotopes locked in ancient teeth let us pick out the migrants from the island-born, catching the crossings in the chemistry of bone. The ocean was both barrier and highway, the thing that kept these worlds sealed and the thing that finally breached them. And every breach, it turns out, tended to end the same way. Set the 10 discoveries in a row, and a dark rhythm emerges. Again and again, the endemic animals of an island vanish soon after human beings arrive. On Cyprus, the dwarf hippos and dwarf elephants disappear around 12,000 years ago at the moment of first settlement. On Madagascar, the elephant birds, the giant lemurs, and the pygmy hippos fade away as people spread across the island. In New Zealand, the moa and Haast's eagle are gone within a century or two of Polynesian arrival. On the Channel Islands, the pygmy mammoths vanish close to the time of Arlington Springs man. In Vanuatu, the horned tortoise and the flightless birds drop out of the record just as the Lapita step ashore. The simplest explanation is overkill. The idea that naive island animals hunted by newcomers and robbed of their eggs could not withstand the pressure. There is real evidence for it. But honesty demands the counter case. Climate shifted at the end of the Ice Age. Seas rose and swallowed habitat. Vegetation changed underfoot. On many islands, human arrival and environmental upheaval came so close together that untangling them may be impossible. Wrangel Island is the revealing exception. There, the last mammoths died out with no clear human hand at all, undone by isolation and most likely sheer bad luck. That case is a caution against blaming people for everything, but the broader pattern is hard to dismiss because islands compress the whole drama into a readable form. What takes ages to unfold on a continent plays out on an island in a few short centuries, fast enough to see. These vanished worlds are more than curiosities. They are rehearsals for what happens when a self-contained ecosystem meets an unstoppable newcomer, and every island endemic alive today sits inside that same equation. But before we can trust any of these stories, we have to ask how we know them at all. None of this would be more than speculation without the methods that date and decode it, and those methods are worth understanding because they are also where the fights break out. The oldest art on Earth was dated not by the paint, but by the calcite growing over it, using the steady decay of uranium as a clock. The bones of Teouma and the hippos of Cyprus were placed in time by radiocarbon, measured on bone and short-lived material. The fossils of Callao cave were dated by uranium series and by electron spin resonance, bracketing the age of a new human species. Other methods read the dead more directly. Ancient DNA rewrote the ancestry of the Lapita people, revealing an almost purely Asian origin no one had predicted. Genomic analysis of the Wrangel mammoths traced their crash to a handful of founders and overturned the story of a slow genetic death. Strontium isotopes in tooth enamel exposed which people at Teouma were migrants, born across the sea. Careful study of cut marks separated true butchery from the gnawing of animals, though at Cyprus the argument between hunting and scavenging still runs hot. Where dating is indirect, controversy follows. The tools of Plakias are dated by the age of the landforms they eroded from, not by the tools themselves, which is exactly why skeptics resist them. A whole human species, Homo Luzonensis, rests on a handful of teeth and finger bones, and some scholars want a skull before they will fully accept it. Extraordinary claims demand corroborating sites, and the best researchers say so plainly. This is not a weakness in the science. Preservation itself shapes the record, because only in rare conditions, frozen ground, dry caves, or waterlogged sediment, do bone and ancient DNA survive at all. The honesty about uncertainty is its strength, and each new method keeps pushing the timelines further back than anyone expected. Islands are sealed experiments in deep time. Cut off by water, each one takes the raw material of life and runs it through its own private set of rules, producing forms that exist nowhere else. A human species with climbing hands, birds heavier than a man, elephants the size of dogs, an eagle that hunted people, a city of black stone raised on a reef. Every discovery in this list is a message from a world that ran alone for a while, and then met the rest of us. The arc repeats with a terrible consistency. Isolation, then adaptation, then arrival, then loss. The sea seals the experiment, and the sea eventually delivers the thing that ends it, whether a raft of hunters, a boat of voyagers, or simply the slow rise of the water itself. There is an eeriness in standing where a whole lineage came to a stop, in holding the last dated bone of a species and knowing the silence that followed it. And the science leaves honest gaps. We do not know for certain who made the tools on Crete, or exactly what killed the last mammoths on Wrangel, or whether the first Cypriots truly slaughtered 500 hippos or merely camped among their bones. Those uncertainties are not failures. They are the marks of a discipline still listening carefully to fragmentary evidence. What Wrangel warns us is that even survival across thousands of years can end by chance. What the flaking pigment of Sulawesi warns us is that some of these messages are being lost in the present faster than we can read them. The living endemics on islands today carry the same fragility that doomed the giants and the dwarfs. These remote places compress evolution and extinction into something we can finally see whole. And somewhere, out past the horizon, on water that has both hidden and revealed so much, more sealed experiments are surely still waiting.